Welcome to episode 6 of my Formula One career. I'm Ian, and we are a week on from the Chinese Grand Prix where we picked up our first points of our career. We are now racing in the 5.4 kilometre circuit of Bahrain, the Bahrain International Circuit, for round 3 of the 2017 Formula One Championship. We started the race weekend with some great news because we've managed to improve the powertrain. We've improved it by 4.62 brake horsepower. We've enhanced the ignition system, which controlled spark plug timing to be in a more efficient way, so it gives us a little bit more engine power, which will really come in handy for this race weekend, because of course Bahrain's got two very, very long straights, the main straight and then that sort of back straight that runs parallel to that main straight, which is great for if you're sitting in the stands, because of course you can see both sections, and both of them are sort of overtaking areas, so it's a great vantage point for the neutral fan. But in FP1, however, it was dry and cloudy, 35 degrees, of course. This is probably the worst practice session because both qualifying and the race are in the evening at night. So FP1 and FP3, they're during the day, so it's very difficult to sort of get the qualifying and the race strategies done, but it does allow us to do sort of track acclimatization, that sort of thing, which is the first thing that we did. We went out very high downforce in FP1, which proved to probably be the worst thing we could have done, because getting on those main straights is very, very difficult. We were losing a lot of time on them, and when we did the track acclimatization, we went round on the first lap and completed it first go. However, I sort of figured, because we were 4.4 seconds off the pace, Sebastian Vettel was leading the timing chart, but we were 4.5 seconds behind him on the same tyre, so I knew we could make up a lot of time. So I figured, despite having already passed the track acclimatization, I thought, let's go out again and see if we can beat the time. But as you can see, as I unwind the car coming out of turn 8, I just get a little bit of oversteer and then overcorrect, and we went sliding into the barrier. Thankfully, all we did was damage our front wing, because it could have been a lot worse. So we had to limp all the way back to the pits, and of course, change the wings, and we also changed the downforce. We put a little bit less downforce, changed the wing angles to be slightly less. So with about 65 minutes remaining in the session, we went out again and did tyre management this time, and passed it with no dramas at all. We actually moved up into 13th in the timing screens, but of course we were on the soft tyres. So about 15 minutes later, once the track had sort of cleared up a bit, because there was a lot of traffic in this first session, we went out and did the fuel saving, and we really, really struggled. The downforce was our biggest concern. We were just losing so much time on those straights. We were really, really struggling this race weekend with car setup. I feel like in China and even in Australia, we really, really nailed the setup just before qualifying. In sort of FP1 and FP2, we sort of had it all set up, and then FP3 was just good to just get used to the car and get a bit of practice under our belt before the qualifying and the race. However, Bahrain, we were still tinkering with the car setup going into qualifying, and you can see as we're going around here on the fuel saving, we're just losing so much time. We were locking up, we weren't finding our braking spots, and as soon as we were sort of getting into the improving our time, we were then losing it at the next corner. We were locking up, running wide. We were really, really struggling. And so at the completion of the fuel saving, we hadn't managed to do it. We'd passed it, but we hadn't gone purple on the team's target. And looking at the data, turns 1 and 9 were probably our worst for fuel saving. We were really, really struggling going into that turn 9. It's a very, very difficult corner to get right. You have to brake on as you're turning in, which is very hard to do. And turn 1, I know we could improve there. So what I did was we lowered the downforce. We went with very, very low downforce, which made the car a little bit slippy on the back, a bit more, getting a little bit of oversteer coming out of some of the slower corners. But this time we went out with around 30 minutes left in the session. And this time we passed first go with absolutely flying colours. There wasn't any concern at all, because we were up by over a second on the target lap time, and of course we were in the optimal range for fuel saving. With about 10 minutes left in FP1, we did go out again on the medium compound tyre. Remember, we set our fastest time on the softs, and in fact we managed to improve on the mediums. We actually did a lot better on the mediums than we did on the soft tyres, setting our fastest lap in the session with a 1:35.2, which put us just behind our teammate by 2/10. And our teammate Nico, he set his time on the soft tyres. So that did, despite all the disappointment of the fuel saving and of course trying to get the car set up the way I liked it, the fact that we were only 2/10 behind Nico on the slower compound tyre put us in quite a good frame of mind for the session later that afternoon in FP2. FP2 though wasn't to be as exciting as I'd hoped because the weather conditions were perfect. It was 31 degrees and that's the same conditions for the race and qualifying, or the expected weather conditions for race and qualifying I should say. So we sort of thought this is going to be the perfect session to do race setup and our qualifying pace as well. Try and get both of them done in this session so that when FP3 comes around, we can just maybe have another go at race strategy, just with a different tyre, maybe sort of even just get a few laps under our belt just to try and find the optimal way around the circuit. So after sitting in the garage for 20 minutes, we went out and attempted to complete the qualifying pace, which we were trying to set on the super soft tyres, but as you can see, we were actually right behind two cars. I believe it was Fernando Alonso ahead of a Silva. I don't know who the Silva driver was, but unfortunately, by the time we started our pace lap, we caught up to the Silva so quickly, and he ended up hurting us coming out of turn 8. You can see we weren't doing too bad for time delta, we were improving, but by the time turn 9 came around, we had to brake so heavily because the Silva held us up and there was nothing we could do. We lost so much time that our lap was effectively ruined. So we went out again the second time, this time with clear track, but we couldn't improve on the time at all. This time we were nearly 3/10 down. And then going into our third and final lap of the program, we locked up coming into turn 1. We got a little bit of oversteer as we go around that second turn. It's a very, very difficult corner, that one, because it's very easy if you get too much onto the power, you will lose the back end, and that's unfortunately what I did, so desperately trying to make up time. So we ended up backing out entirely on the lap, and we just came back into the pits, knowing that we still had to do the qualifying pace, and we still had to do the race pace as well. But we were still finding it really, really tricky. With 57 minutes left in the session, we stuffed up our first lap yet again. So we were now really starting to get a little bit worried about our qualifying pace and even our race pace. So we pushed that little bit harder on the second lap on our second attempt on the qualifying program. But as you can see, coming out of turn 4, just got on the power that little bit too hard, got a big dose of oversteer and went careening into the barrier, and that was our session done. And we still have yet to complete race pace, and we are still yet to complete the qualifying pace. That's our second attempt on it, and we still haven't got close. At the moment, we're only estimated to be P17. That's not good enough. So the following morning, of course, FP3, we still had to do qualifying pace and we still had to do race strategy as well. And we intended on doing 2 lots of race strategy. We wanted to do it on the softs and again on the super softs because that's one of the team objectives, to help try and nail the race strategy. We didn't actually have any difficulty with the race strategy. We were consistently 1 second a lap quicker than what the team expected, which was fantastic. The only worry that we had was our fuel burn was a little high during this program, so that's something that we have to factor in on race day, because I was trying to do the race strategy like I would the race, so that's something that we have to be mindful with on tomorrow's race. But about 15 minutes later, with about halfway through the session, we had one final go on the qualifying setup. We were down to our final set of unused super soft tyres, so we really had to nail this, and this time there was no problem at all. We were targeted 15th, but we ended up being good enough for 11th. So that kept the team happy. I was happy with that. 11th isn't too bad. I know we could probably improve on that, but you know, let's be real. We're not the best team in the world. We've done very, very well in China, getting as high as we did, but this is really our target. 11th place, 10th, something like that. Just squeezing into Q3 is a lot more realistic, our expectations. So China, I think, was just a very, very lucky race weekend for us last weekend. So with 15 minutes left, we actually went out again, and this time completed the race strategy program once again, but this time we used the super soft tyres, which was the same tyres that we just completed the qualifying pace on, because we only did that 1 lap on them. So they were quite fresh, and I knew that we could go around and do the 5 laps without too much difficulty. We struggled on that first lap. We did lose a little bit of time there, But we then smashed through the next 4 laps without any real difficulty or danger of failing the program. Again, we burned through fuel a little bit too quick, but rather interestingly, our super soft times were very, very consistent to our soft times, which, remember that for tomorrow's episode. At the softs and the super softs, there's not a great deal of difference between the times. You'll remember back to the end of FP1, where we were very, very close to Nico Hulkenberg in terms of time, and we were on softs and he was on the mediums. And same here, the super softs and the softs, there's not a great deal of difference between the two of them. But at the end of the session, we were only 2/10 behind our teammate Nico, who also set his time on the super softs as well, which put us in the right frame of mind for qualifying later that day. We were all ready to go for qualifying here in round 3 in Bahrain. We had a target of 12th or higher, which I thought was really achievable, despite only managing 11th in FP3 on the qualifying program. I knew there was a couple more tenths in it. So we went out quite early on, but as you can see, we locked up very, very hard into the first turn, and that effectively ruined our lap. Despite the rest of the lap being very, very clean, very, very smooth, and in fact I would even say that we perhaps made up a little bit of time, we only managed a 1:34.2, which was well off the pace. I knew we could do better than that, and of course it meant we definitely had to go out again. So what we decided to do is we took a risk. We stayed with the current set of used super softs that we used for that first lap and decided to go out a second time with 10 minutes left in the session. And this time we took 2/10 off the time that we set at the beginning of Q1, but that's still not enough to even get us out of this session. We was down in 16th place. We had Alonso just ahead of us, we had Marcus Ericsson behind us, and I was starting to get a little bit worried because our teammate Nico was up in P8, if you can believe that, and we were really, really struggling. This looked like it was going to be the complete opposite to what happened in China. Remember, in China, Nico didn't get out of Q1 and we ended up making it all the way to Q3, and this looked like it was going to be the opposite to what happened last week. So with just under 4 minutes left in the session, we threw on a nice fresh set of unused super soft tyres, and this was our last chance. We really had to get a good lap down to get into Q2, and I'll let you watch it uninterrupted. So we made up a lot of time in turns 5, 6 and 7. And of course we actually improved on our time going through turn 13 despite running a little bit wide. And of course suffering with a little bit of traffic with the Red Bull coming into turn 9, sort of having to making us change our ideal line going through that corner a little bit. But we really, really aced that lap and shaved nearly 8/10 off our time to give us a 1:33.2, which put us up into P8. So we managed to make it into Q2 despite a very nerve-wracking session there. We've managed to finish P9 ahead of Felipe Massa and the two Haas cars. Nico Hulkenberg ended up falling down into P13, but dropping out then is Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll, Stoffel Van Dorn, and the two Saubers, Marcus Ericsson. Q2 went a lot smoother than Q1, however. We went out very, very early. Only Kimi Räikkönen was ahead of us, and he was quite a long way up the road by the time we were setting our first lap. But we went out on the soft tyres. We thought we'd set a banker lap on the soft tyres because there's not a great deal of difference, remember, from the soft tyres and the super soft tyres in our race pace. We found that they were very, very similar times. The softs were probably only about 0.2 slower. So we sort of thought if we can get into Q3 on the soft tyres, then that puts us in a very good position on race day. But we weren't expecting that because we were kind of expected to only squeeze into Q3. I kind of thought the soft tyres were a bit pointless, but at least we were going to be able to set a banker lap this time. And hopefully it was going to be a pretty decent lap, which it turned out to be as we crossed the line with a 1:33.6, which was a 10th up on our teammate who was on the super soft tyres on his first lap. And by the time we decided to go out again, we went out with 3 minutes 45 left in the session. We were sitting P7. And we just didn't think that was quite safe enough. We had Romain Grosjean and Carlos Sainz in 9th and 10th, and they were only 0.2 off the pace. And you could expect to see Grosjean potentially jump in ahead of us. Carlos Sainz, perhaps not so much, but I didn't feel safe where we were. So we sort of thought we have to go out again to make it into Q3. So with 3 minutes 45 left in the session, we went out again on the fresh set of super soft tyres, and we found 0.3. We were up by over half a second on our previous time going through turn 9, but we scrubbed off a lot of that time because we just lost a little bit of pace and ended up crossing the line with a 1:33.3, which put us in P8. There was Romain Grosjean and Esteban Ocon. They were in the 1:33.3s as well. Grosjean and Ocon setting the same times. And of course, if we hadn't gone out again, we would have been eliminated because Felipe Massa's time was actually better than our first lap. He did a 1:33.6 and was the last driver to be eliminated, along with Carlos Sainz, Nico Hulkenberg, our teammate, Kevin Magnussen, and Danny Kvyat. So as we only had one unused set of super softs available, it did mean that once again we only had the one shot at making a decent lap. So we went out with just over 3 minutes remaining in the session. Sebastian Vettel had the provisional pole at the time with a 1:31.6. Esteban Ocon was the slowest with a 1:33.8. So if we got under 1:33.8, there was a possibility that we could finish above P10. And I'll now be quiet as you watch the lap in all its glory. Not the best of laps there, as you can see, a 1:33.964, a very, very poor lap. I knew I could do better. You could see it was very, very sloppy, a lot of lockups, a lot of running wide, not a very smooth lap at all. But as you can see, we were quite off the pace, really. Ocon improved to a 1:33.7. We didn't even improve on his previous time, which was a 1:33.8, because we obviously came in a 10th behind him. So we will start P10 for tomorrow's race.
You seem to be struggling with the setup all weekend. What do you feel went wrong?
I think it was just a balance thing at the end of the day.
we were getting a lot of oversteer coming out of turns 4 and 9, so we were trying to sort of counteract that a little bit, but then on the flip side, we were losing a lot of speed on the straights. So, it was just, we just couldn't find that happy middle ground. We were sort of one extreme to the other, but I think by the end of practice 3, we managed to do it.
Thanks for that.
No worries.